Hey guys, it's Generalkidd here. How's everyone doing today? So, for today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the secret vehicles in Halo 4 that you normally can't drive. So, much like with the weapons video, I did sort of cover some of these vehicles before in the previous video, but now that the official Halo 4 mod tools are out, there's a lot of stuff that's in those files that were never like in the actual game that we couldn't really take a look at them in the past. But now, with the mod tools, we can take a look at all of them and see what all these vehicles are like and what it's like to drive all of them, or at least the ones that we can. So let's get right into it. So let's start with some of the obvious ones first, and the first one is the Mammoth. So you've seen the Mammoth in campaign before, but you've never been able to drive it, actually. And it's a very interesting vehicle to drive. So it doesn't actually work in on MCC, it just kept falling to the ground for me, so I'm doing this like directly in the mod tools. And it does drive well, and it seems to be like based off a Warthog. You can see here I can actually power slide the Mammoth. I can just lock the rear four wheels and just drift in a Mammoth, which is kind of odd, but yeah. Next up we have the Broadsword, the campaign version of it at least. This one, you could spawn a Broadsword in multiplayer now in Forge. Just the multiplayer one, not the campaign one, but it's mostly the same, but I wanted to throw it out there just so you could see it again. And, if you're still playing on the Xbox 360 version of Halo 4, then obviously this is one that you won't be able to spawn in Forge, because it's only on MCC. And it's the same with this next vehicle, the Revenant. This was actually a cut vehicle that was included in some leaked early builds of Halo 4, and it is now available to spawn in Forge on MCC as well. But, again, if you're on a 360 version of Halo 4, that is not the case. But this Revenant, it's pretty complete. You could drive it around. It doesn't really have any sound effects. The shader does work, but that's about it for this Revenant. Interesting vehicle, and it's available now as well. Alright, let's get into the vehicles that are less available. And the first one is the Cruise Missile model. That's what it's actually called. This one's the more complete version. And it's once you get in, you just die instantly because it just drops to the ground. So I had to spawn it like much higher in the air so that I could actually, carefully get to it without detonating it. And then I could fly it around because it goes really fast and it crashes if it's close to the ground. But now that it's high up in the air, I can actually fly it around just fine. You can see it has its own special HUD, so to speak, as in it changes the color. But it's a very interesting missile to fly around. I think it's the missile that you use during that mission in Halo 4 where you call in like the Predator missile or something like that to blow up that Forerunner gravity well or whatever. So that's like the complete version. There's also in the tags another cruise missile model. This is a prototype version or like a temporary test version, and it's just a untextured, like low poly simple missile model. And it also has like space Banshee physics or something like that. It handles like a space Banshee, and I could just fly it around, and I think it is third person by default as well, so it doesn't have a special HUD or anything. But again, it's another interesting vehicle and kind of a fun one to fly around for some reason. Next up we have another missile. This one's just called UNSC missile, and this one is a much bigger missile than the other one. It appears to just be like a stretched out version, sort of. And it also has its own special HUD. I'm not sure this one's used anywhere at all in the game, but this one's even more difficult to control. Even once I get in the air, I can't lift off in it. It just kind of like drops down once it's in the air. Next up we have the CA Dom turret, which is actually just the Dominion turret that's used in some multiplayer maps in the Dominion game type. It is kind of AI controlled actually. I can't use it. I can't fire it. I can get into it, but that's about it. Next up we have the Storm Burst Artillery. This one, I actually don't know if this is used anywhere in campaign either. At least, I don't remember the Halo 4 campaign like extremely well. So if you do remember where it's used, let me know. But it kind of just fires like a burst of Wraith mortars in the air, and then when they drop down, they just drop down and just explode everywhere. It's an interesting projectile actually. I don't feel like I've seen it anywhere in the campaign, but I could be wrong about that. Next up we have the Falcon. So the Falcon here is actually just a scenery object, so you can't actually drive it. But it is left over from Halo Reach, and it can still be spawned in, but it's just unusable. but it was interesting to spawn in nonetheless. But we won't be driving that one in this case. Next up, we have the Scarab main turret. This is another leftover model from Halo Reach, and it's a pretty big one too, just like the actual Scarab itself. But the Scarab main turret still works, still spawnable, and I could still drive it. Well, obviously I have to modify a little bit to be able to drive it, but I can still drive it, and I can still fire its shots, and its shots are very powerful. That could destroy that Storm artillery turret in just a couple shots, which it's actually very difficult because it has very powerful shields, as you saw earlier. Next up, we have the Bishop turret. This is just a leftover UNSC anti-infantry turret from the mission The Package in Halo Reach, and it's still completely functional. It still does the exact same thing, but I guess it's a placeholder for the Bishop turret in this game. Next up, we have the Mammoth gun. So again, just like the Mammoth itself, this one just falls to the ground if I try to drive it on MCC. So I had to do it in the mod tools directly, specifically in the Sapien tool. And this one, we're just going to do right on the Mammoth itself, actually. So this gun actually has its own special HUD, and it's a pretty complete HUD too. A really cool one as well. So that kind of tells me that this was meant to be, it was planned to be usable at one point, maybe. Like, you're supposed to control the Mammoth cannon while it's being driven around or something like that. But yeah. Next up, we have the OBS landing tube VH. I don't know what this is. It's just a little cube here, but it is a vehicle. It is drivable, but I don't really know what it's for. We also have the turret base here, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's just the base of a turret, but it actually is a vehicle itself. And it's an odd one because I can actually flip it, and it seems like it has some kind of invisible cannon to it, which is why it can flip easily, but I'm not really sure what's going on there. And here we have the UNSC missile turret. This one, I believe you see it on the mission Infinity, and I think it's all over the Infinity, shooting at the Didax ship at the very end. But again, it's not something you can drive, but now we can, and it's a pretty cool thing. And some of these vehicles, they're actually very functional, and they should be added to Forge, officially in MCC. Like the Storm, the UNSC artillery here, this is a really cool vehicle. It's a pretty cool turret, and it's actually very useful, and if it was added officially, I could see it being used for some pretty interesting maps as well. Next up, we have the Asteroid gun. This is actually just a leftover MAC cannon from Halo Reach, but it actually is used in campaign. It appears in the middle of the mission Composer, and you can see it in distance outside of the map, shooting at random ships in the air. But there actually is a glitch to get out of the map on that mission and to actually use these turrets. Now you can see it's left over, but slightly modified, because you sit where you would have sat in Halo Reach, where Emil sat as well. And you just float there because it's been removed, but not much else has been changed about these. Next up, we have the anti-infantry turret. This is actually literally just the leftover version from Halo Reach. It was duplicated for the Storm Bishop turret, I guess, as a placeholder, but this is the actual original one, just completely left over. And here we have the Storm anti-infantry turret. This one, I believe, is the final version of the placeholder version of the Bishop turret and the anti-infantry turret. But you've seen this one in campaign before. It's that beam turret that charges up and fires beams at you. And it's a vehicle as well, and totally drivable. And here we have a cut version of the Space Banshee. You could pretty much tell it's cut and not actually used in game anywhere, but it's still here, and I believe it's left over from Halo Reach as well, or at least based on the Halo Reach version. And it was never, I guess a Halo 4 version was meant to be made, but it was never finished, and it's kind of left in this kind of prototype stage. But this Space Banshee is fast, probably the fastest vehicle there is. You can see it's so fast and really difficult to control as well. Alright, now we have the Covenant Drop Pod, the multiplayer version, which I believe is actually just used in Spartan Ops, but I'm pretty sure it's used in multiple places as well, just not in multiplayer itself. But it is drivable, rather rideable, and it's got a lot of seats in it actually, so I just showed you one seat there. Next up, we have the Storm anti-vehicle turret. I believe this one is used during the last mission of Halo 4 while you're in space, and these are shooting at you as well. These are huge, and it's one of the bigger vehicles in the game. It's bigger than the Scarab itself almost. But it can be fired and it can be driven as well. It's a pretty cool pretty cool vehicle. Now, as is tradition in many recent games, Halo games, we can drive the Scarab as well. But the Scarab in Halo 4 is quite broken, more than it is in Halo Reach. Because this is obviously just left over from Reach, which Reach itself is also kind of like carried over from Halo 3. And the one in Halo 4, as you can see, is very broken there. The legs don't even really work properly. Alright, next up we have the Drop Pod Elite. Another leftover Halo Reach vehicle. This is just the Elite Drop Pod, and it's still functional. When I get in, even the hatch blows off too. It's flashing yellow because the textures or the shader or whatever is broken on it. So that's why it's like that. And it's the same with this one, the Covenant Squad Drop Pod. Also a rideable vehicle, and I believe it has multiple seats. This is the one that's meant to carry like grunts and jackals as it drops down. But you know, it's obviously kind of broken, and it has this like, you know, landing detonation effect to its side, which actually if you touch it and the effect happens, you die instantly. This next one's a very weird one. This is the Covenant Giant Drop Pod, but it looks like a circus tent from the outside, and that's because on the inside, well, it is a circus tent. There's 3 clowns sitting on the inside of this Covenant Giant Drop Pod, and obviously this is a whole placeholder for, I'm guessing it's a placeholder for that huge Covenant Drop Pod that I showed like a minute ago. It has a lot of seats in it, but this one is I guess the in development placeholder, and you can actually still sit in it too. It's a very odd vehicle. And for the last vehicle that I'll be showing is the Storm Tracer turret. I believe this is another one that's shown on the final mission during that broadsword run, and again, it's another drivable one. This is a really cool looking vehicle too. I kind of like it better than the anti-vehicle one as well, but it fires a single shot, and that's really about it for this vehicle. So there you guys have it. Those are all the secret vehicles in Halo 4 that you normally can't drive. I think there were like a couple here and there that like I couldn't spawn in or I couldn't get working either, but these are the ones that I could demonstrate. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and found it to be interesting. If you did, make sure to leave a like, leave your thoughts in the comments. If there's anything I missed or anything else you want to see, let me know in the comments down below. But aside from that, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you all next time. Bye guys!